If you're watching this, it's probably likely that you've seen about 1 million targeted ads in Facebook or Instagram all across the internet for Safari Pedals plugins. I will say, man, they have a really aggressive marketing campaign going on over there. I think the downside to that is that if you see it over and over again and you have all these influencers talking about how great these plugins are, it may sort of reach an oversaturation point where you think maybe these are just sort of generic plugins that are just dressed up in a really eye-catching UI. So what is the deal with Safari Pedals plugins? First of all, really weird name for a plugin company. I always get plugin and pedal confused. I think the idea is that they want to impart sort of a guitar pedal style interface onto these plugins, which I think works most of the time. I think Gnome over at Safari Pedals, who I've had correspondence with in the past, really cares about the way that these plugins sound. I think he has a long history of audio engineering. A lot of the plugins are taking some of his favorite analog hardware gear and trying to capture those sounds, the things that he really likes. I haven't noticed a ton of bugs or glitches with these plugins. They don't feel like they're cheaply made, I guess, with like, you know, shoddy coding or anything like that. I haven't noticed that they're especially taxing on CPU. I think that they're solidly coded. I think that they sound solid. Do I think they're good plugins? Yes, I think they're great plugins, especially if you fall into one of these 4 categories. The first one is you're just starting out with audio production and mixing. I think if you're tired of the stock plugins that you have in your DAW and you want a different sound or a different character, this is a great place to look because it covers the whole range of plugins. You got an EQ, you got a compressor, you got a limiter, you got effects, you got delay, you got reverb, all those things that you might find in stock plugins for your DAW, but this just has a different sound and a different interface that you might gravitate more towards. Also, there isn't a ton of visual feedback on these plugins, so they really do make you use your ears. So for something like the Dragon EQ, there's not a spectrum meter there to tell you what's happening in every frequency across the spectrum. You just listen, and listening really helps you get better at mixing. That's why I would say that these are a great set of plugins for somebody just starting out. It just offers something different than the stock plugins that you may be used to, with a different UI, different sound. Next, if you're really into sort of vintage, heavy analog saturation type sound, there's a lot of great plugins in here that do that type of thing. So you have something like the Fox Echo Chorus, which is really modeled after a vintage unit, and it sounds legit. It's just a really cool effect to play around with. If you're into lo-fi production, so that might be like lo-fi hip-hop or like garage rock or sort of like dirty-ish production, there's a whole suite of plugins in here that sort of gravitate towards that type of sound. A lot of these are simple plugins that are easy to dial in. You're not diving into menus, you're not adjusting a million parameters. These plugins really aid in that sort of creative process where you're just grabbing something quickly, dialing in a sound, and just moving on to the next thing. They're very creative and fluid plugins to use. Lastly, I think this is a great set of plugins if you're a guitar player or if you're mixing a lot of guitar heavy sort of music. Something like the Dirty Dog reverb, you can just go direct in with an electric guitar into your interface and use that to get all kinds of cool sounds. The Ladybug reverb is really fun to play with on guitar. It just has a really nice, kind of easy reverb to dial in on guitar sounds. So sound off in the comments too if you have any Safari Pedals plugins, which ones you like, how you use them. So which ones do I actually use in my mixes and stuff? I use the Gorilla Drive still. That was the first one that came out. It's a really simple sort of one knob saturation tool. I use the Flamingo Verb all the time. I dialed in a room sound that I use on drums that sounds really, really natural. It's also a unique plugin because as you sort of dial up the time knob, you get 4 really unique sounding reverbs, which are really fun to play with. I'm using the rabbit tape a lot. It's a really nice finisher plugin to just add a warmth and saturation to your mix. The Time Machine sort of does the same thing, but you get 4 different options of what that saturation sounds like. Also, you can use it as like a utility plugin to just add a vinyl crackle to your whole mix if you want to do that. I do have a couple criticisms with these plugins. I feel like the auto gain on these plugins isn't always super helpful. A lot of times it's just sort of like the inverse. You go up and then the output just comes down. I get better sounds when I drive the input and the output is way further down. Also, I recognize that the UI on these plugins can be pretty divisive. There are a couple cases where the UI is just maybe a little bit distracting. The camel strip, it's a great channel strip plugin, but if you're really heavily using that plugin and you're looking at it a lot, that UI can be a little bit disorienting. It's a little nuts. So I am an affiliate with Safari Pedals, which means that if you use the link down in the description to make a purchase over there at Safari Pedals, I get a small portion of your purchase back to this channel, which I'll just use for beer money. It's not a lot. Alright, thanks for checking out this video. Last thing you should know is that Safari Pedals offers a 15-day free trial on all of their plugins, and that is a true free trial. There's no audio dropouts, glitches, or anything like that in the sound, so you can use it on a mix, use it in your project, and you can genuinely see if it's something that you would like to use.